What's up guys, MikeCoco back here, bringing you guys a new video on the costumes of the month for October. Now before I start off this video, I just want to say that I was inactive on YouTube for quite a long time actually. I've been sick for like the last 3 weeks, had a cold, I was coughing everywhere, and I literally couldn't speak for longer than like a minute without coughing. And the commentary would just be awful, it would just be coughing everywhere, and it would be a pain to edit, so I decided I'm not going to make any videos because it's just going to be terrible quality. I'm gonna wait till I get better, and now I'm pretty much better. I don't feel 100% yet, but I'm like 90%, so I think we're good. I haven't forgotten about the update, so I will be making the video on the new Season 8 heroes, Dark, GospodinSrba, and Metatron. They're actually quite interesting, both of them. And I also have an exploration video that's gonna be out soon because I just hit a new record in Explorer, and I think it might help a lot of free players out there. So let's get on with the costumes of the month. We have 4 costumes. One of them is the Mythic Season Mythic costume, and the rest are for the Legendary / Mythic heroes. So I'm going to start off with the Legendary / Mythic heroes. We have Blood Pearl. She is a S3 hero from way back, long time ago. Gun user, and her costume increases her stats by 20%. Now, 20% stat buff seems like a lot, but keep in mind that Blood Pearl actually has a 3x3 skill, which means that her initial skill has a lower SDF at 1.69 or something. So with this 20%, she actually just barely gets up to standard, and she's still actually under the row and column hitters at 1.89. So just keep in mind of that. Now her skill changes from a chance to silence into a guaranteed silence for 2 turns. So that's decent, but considering now we have a lot of bosses are immune to bewitches, silences, stuns, whatever, anything that's crowd controlling, it really doesn't help that it's a guaranteed silence. It would have been useful a long time ago, back when bosses weren't immune to that crowd controlling skills, but now that they're all immune, there's no point. The interesting part is that she has a 0.2% increase for attack for gun heroes, and although it's interesting, it's not exactly useful or usable in the current meta because she has to apply her skill every time, I believe, for this attack buff to occur. And her skill is 300 Fury, which is a lot. And even in Mythic Raid, in the first few rounds where you have a lot of Fury, 300 Fury is still going to eat up into your Fury pool. So then you have to consider whether or not 300 Fury is worth having this buff. Now I don't have Blood Pearl, so I don't know how much it scales up to. If I'm assuming this is a level 1 Blood Pearl, so at level 1 it's 0.2. So I'm assuming it then increments by 0.2% each level. At level 50 it's a 10% buff if my math is right, and at level 100, if it even scales past level 50, it'll be a 20% buff, and that's it. So 20% buff is not huge, especially considering her initial skill is very poor, and she costs a lot of Fury, and her mythic skill is not good. Her mythic skill is just a gold increase, I believe, so it's not useful if you want to actually, get ahead in rankings. So Blood Pearl's costume I would not recommend, simply because on paper it looks good, but in practice it's just not gonna work. So there's that. The next costume is Rideran's costume. We actually had a previous Rideran costume back in, I want to say, 2-3 months ago, and it was a free costume. It was 1 heart, but you just had to wait for it to get into the chrono. Now we have a new costume. It increases the attack by 10%, but keep in mind that if you had the old costume, it's technically only a 5% increase over the event costume, and he turns all weird and crap, looks like a schoolboy. It's kind of dumb, but whatever. His skill changes. He loses the defense debuff. He still retains his attack debuff, but now he gets a critical damage buff by 30%. Now, in one of my previous costumes of the month video, I think I mentioned that critical damage buff is very similar to attack buff, because as long as you're hitting crits, they're going to be dealing 30% more damage, which is basically similar to an attack up by 30%, albeit a little bit worse because you always have to crit. Now that's not a problem for Rideran, because you can place him in the same row as Neff, or place him in front of someone like Pram, and they'll be critting pretty much every turn, so it's not a problem in that case. But the only situation where I would recommend Rideran's costume is when your best hero is Rideran. Because, as you've seen in my Mythic Raid video about defense debuffs, we all know that more defense debuffs does actually increase the damage for the rest of your heroes. And when you lose out one defense debuff, you're losing out damage from other heroes, because other heroes will be hitting less against the boss. So you either have to bring in a new hero to replace them in order to get back that defense debuff, or you just have to make do without it and deal less damage overall. Now, if we take into perspective someone who has a Lasita and a Rideran, Lasita is going to hit much harder than Rideran. Probably ever will in Rideran's entire life. So then you have to consider whether or not a 30% increase in damage for Rideran is worth having lower damage on your Lasita, who does infinitely times more damage. So that's the reason why I say if Ritter is your best hero, you should pick up this costume, because technically he'll be your damage dealer and you'll be increasing damage for himself. But if you have someone like Lasita who is hitting a boss with one less defense debuff, it could potentially mean hitting the difference between 20 mil and 15 mil. And that's 5 mil damage that Ritter will never ever make up. So that's the conclusion I can get from Ritteran's costume. And lastly, we have Sarah Pendragon. She was released in S7, so it's actually quite surprising we got a costume already for her. Her costume does not do a lot, it just changes her attack from regular physical damage to magic damage. Nothing about her skill changes, and her fury cost is still 200. Now, out of all three of these costumes for free players, this is probably the best. Now, in the last costumes video, there was the Alina costume where you can have a 50% reduction in fury for 2 turns rather than 1 turn. And as you can see, Sarah does not provide that skill. But Sarah does have an additional skill, which is her myth skill. Her myth skill, actually I don't have her, so what am I doing? Her myth skill increases the attack for ranged heroes by some percentage, probably around 50, by somewhere around 15%, I think, for level 1. And so by having Sarah Pendragon's costume, you can decrease the fury and you can increase the ranged hero's attack. Now this is very useful if you don't have Balor, if you didn't pick up Balor's costume and you picked up Reyna's costume, because this means that you can place Sarah and your hard-hitting agility or ranged users in the same row, have lower fury cost, and have increased damage. Now the reason why I would suggest getting Sarah's costume is because Alina is very squishy. Magic users tend to die early in the current metagame, as pointed out by someone on the comments of my last video. I think they do in fact die fairly early, so having Alina survive even with tank gear is going to be difficult. Even though agility users aren't tanks, they do have in fact more tanking potential than magic users. And so I would see that Sarah probably has better use in Mythic Raid and debatably Explore, because Alina might die very early in Mythic Raid, as I know my Jury is one of the first heroes to die, among my legendaries of course, is one of the first heroes to die in Mythic Raid. And the magic or the ranged heroes not so much, they die a little bit later. So you can have the extra benefit of having more damage and a lower fury cost. And we also have another costume that emulates or simulates Alina's skill. Hyrule will later get a costume that provides the same function as Alina's skill but also steals fury. So then you have to wonder whether or not Alina's costume is even useful at all, aside from the myth skill, because Hyrule's myth skill is not that great. It just increases minimum damage for himself. It doesn't provide a team-wide attack bonus like Sarah does. So out of the 3 costumes, the only costume I would recommend is Sarah, and even at that, I would be hesitant to recommend her because we have the 2-turn fury reducers, which are debatable if you want a 2-turn reducer that can save you a little bit of fury, or if you want a 1-turn fury reducer but provides ranged attack. So in that case, Sarah is a choice for free players. Now if we look at Uriel's costume, it changes. I think it gives him an attack up. I don't remember. Yes, it increases its attack by 25.5%, and this is probably gonna go up to 75%. I don't have Uriel. I have no idea. If you guys know, please tell me in the comments. But the point is, even if it only goes up to 50%, I think it's still decent, because the only thing that's changed is his attack up, I believe, right? Yeah, it's only the attack up, but he already provides additional damage to the bosses. So effectively, this is like another 25% attack. If you rank it up, even if it only tops out at 50, that's an additional 50% attack plus another 30%, which is actually 80% more attack. So Uriel's costume is probably worth getting out of all four of them if you have Uriel, but otherwise Sarah Pendragon is my recommendation. So yeah, that's pretty much it for this video, guys. Peace.